Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, my name is Becky Robinson. I'm the founder and CEO of Weaving Influence, and I'm with Joanie Connell today for the honest truth, what it is really like at work. And we are so glad that you've joined us today. Before we get started, I want to let you know about a few housekeeping items. You'll notice perhaps in the chat window that we welcome you to live tweet the event. And as we get into the content, Joanie has on her slides actually the hashtag that we want to use, which is flying without. And also Joanie's Twitter handle. Is that on the slides too, Joanie?
No.
No, okay. So if you want to, maybe you can put that in the chat window. Sorry about that. Anyway, we're so excited to have you with us. We're really looking forward to learning. And I would love to hear from you what it is that compelled you to come or what most interests you about today's event. So what I invite you to do is to try out the question panel, which you'll find on your GoToWebinar dashboard. And if you want to share that response as we're getting started, Chantal's already telling me about the weather, and it is freezing cold here in Lambertville, Michigan. We had sub-zero wind chills this morning, Fahrenheit. And I know it's still morning in California, but Joanie and I have this little rule. She's not allowed to tell me about how lovely it is in San Diego, or else she has to send me a plane ticket.
Oh, I didn't realize that was the consequence.
Oh, yeah. You have to say mom on the beautiful weather in San Diego. That's the rule. I'm really ready to get out of Michigan and enjoy some spring weather. Well, thank you, Paul. So it looks like we have friends in South Carolina who are getting snow already. Oh, my goodness. Kathy says she has 2 kids in college, and she works very hard to raise them to be independent. So if there are any other comments, we are going to have questions later. So speaking of that, well, in a second. So Elena is saying that she mentors students and volunteers and activities with young adults. So she's interested in the session for that reason. So before I give you an overview of our session today, I want to take just a few minutes to introduce our guest, Dr. Joanie Connell. We met, I'm not even sure how, through online and through the book author community, and actually had the chance to meet in person last year in San Francisco, which was really fun. Joanie is a talent management expert and career coach for people across job levels, ages, and industries. She also works with companies to attract, develop, and retain top talent, and she works with individuals to improve their success and happiness in their careers. Joanie has advanced degrees in psychology from UC Berkeley, and she has a bachelor's degree in engineering from Harvard. So she has a very interesting background. And one of the things I'd also love you to know is that Joanie is a mom of a 12-year-old daughter. Is that right?
She just turned 13.
Oh, my goodness. I have one of those in my house, too. And so as a parent, she brings that interesting perspective, the blend of a parent's perspective and a professional's perspective to this topic. A couple more comments that I want to share before we jump in, Joanie. Our friend Bernard says that he does quite a bit of work with millennials and younger employees and the challenges that they encounter upon their entry into the workplace. Bob says that he really likes the title, Flying Without a Helicopter, and he has sunshine and warm weather in Oceanside, California. Bob, thanks for joining us. So, Joanie, if you could show me the next slide, I want to give our viewers an overview of what we're going to cover together today. We're basically going to break our content today into 2 parts. In the beginning, Joanie is going to talk to us about expectations and resilience in preparing for the workplace. And then we're going to break for some Q&A, so you can feel free throughout those first 2 sections to put your questions and comments into the panel. Then we're going to talk about independence and creativity, and again, at the end, we're going to have time for more Q&A. So for today's presentation, we're going to turn off the cameras while Joanie is speaking, and then we'll turn it back on when we have that interaction during the questions. So thanks so much to all of you who have joined us, and we look forward to your tweets and your interaction throughout this event today.
Okay, it's my turn?
It's your turn. I'm going to turn off my webcam.
Okay, I'm going to turn mine off too so you can focus on the slides.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Becky, you know, it's interesting because you're one of the few people I know who just loves their job. Most people complain about their work. I was actually at a talk by Marshall Goldsmith about a week ago, And he reminded us of the importance of being in the present, the here and now. He said the great Western disease is called "I'll be happy when." We in the West, in America especially, we tend to keep pushing ourselves and distracting ourselves and promising ourselves if we just get through this crazy time, we'll be happy and we'll live happily ever after. Well, it doesn't work that way. And especially at work, it doesn't work that way. I mention this because it's epidemic among the youth right now. We're working so hard to get them prepared to be in work. They're working so hard in school, they want to get into the best colleges, and then they want to get their dream job and live happily ever after. Only when they finally arrive at work, they find that they're at the bottom of the ladder, they're looking up. And the problem is, no matter where you are in the ladder, work is work. It's not play, it's work. That's why we get paid. That's what everyone says. Well, the truth is, much of what we do every day is boring and tedious, even if we do love our jobs. We sit in boring meetings, we read boring emails, we edit, we revise, we reinvent the same stuff over and over again. We listen to complaints from customers, clients, viewers, depending on what kind of work you're in, managers, coworkers. We get one great moment in a day, or maybe a week or a month. We usually say, wow, it's all worth it. The problem is, we're not preparing young people for this environment. The winds have shifted and we've taken a tack towards sort of easing their pain. We tell them, oh, everything is awesome. And I have a little video here for you to show you. Wait a second here. Some of you may have seen this on the Oscars this weekend. That's just a joke, and it's a satire of real life there, and they're showing everybody at work saying everything is awesome all the time. This is the Lego movie. But that's what we're teaching kids. We don't want to see them suffer. We tell them that everyone's an artist, everyone's a winner, we're all beautiful, and we turn work into fun and games, especially at school. We give people rewards to make it fun and have incentives. Well, no wonder there's a disconnect when these kids arrive in the workplace. Their expectations are totally out of whack with the real world of work. We find that young people are usually more idealistic. We see this all the time. People say, well, isn't this always true of younger generations? Well, yes, but we're dealing with more than that right now. Oh, wait a sec. The harsh reality is work is often boring, it's tedious, it's difficult, and it's frustrating. I was talking to Jim Blackburn, who was the author of the foreword to my book, and he told me a story last week that was really important for us to think about. He was in an organization that was selecting students from college to be interns for Congress, congressional interns. And they found that they were getting a lot of complaints at the workplace from these Congress people saying that the students who were the interns were not able to communicate well. They had terrible writing skills, and it was a big problem for them. They had to write to the constituents, and they had to take notes from meetings that they would attend for the Congress folks and stuff like that. And so Jim and his committee went back and said, well, how can we change this process to assess whether these students are good communicators and good writers? And they said, well, great, we will put together a requirement where you have to turn in a paper that you've written for school that's been graded by a professor. That way we know it's your writing. So the next round came, they got the papers in that were graded by professors, and they read the papers, and the papers were written terribly. There were errors throughout and all sorts of problems, not very well written, and The problem was they had A's on their papers. And Jim said, aha, now we know where the problem is. The problem is that the kids growing up are not being given honest feedback on their work. They're not forced to edit, rewrite, revise again until they get it right. And then they show up ill-equipped at work. The millennials, in particular, also suffer from the happily ever after problem. They've given up their youth to fill their resumes, to get into the best colleges, to get into the best jobs. And when they finally get to work, they say, wow, you know what, I've done all that, now where's my dream job? And that's coming across to managers as this entitlement factor. But then the millennials wake up in real life and they say, wow, this isn't what I was expecting. This is a lot harder, it's tedious, and they burn out or they leave, they quit. And we're finding this to be a big problem in the workplace. Well, what does it take to be successful in the real world of work? I've put together a model of 4 different components. They are being resilient, empowered, authentic, and limber. Let me just define each one for you. Resilient is to stay engaged and stay positive no matter what happens, when you make mistakes, when you run into barriers. Empowered is to be independent, to be able to get things done. Authentic is to be aware of yourself, to be able to communicate what you actually are feeling and thinking in a way that is hearable by others, but also to understand what your imperfections are. That's huge. Limber is essentially being flexible and creative. We're finding that that's really important in the workplace, being resourceful and being able to improvise, as well as having some creativity to innovate and come up with new solutions for things. So how do you set your expectations straight? We've got this idea that people are told everything is awesome, yet the real world is tough, you need all these things. What can you do? Well, speaking to the younger folks and the parents and teachers of these younger folks, get a job, do chores, pay for things with money you've earned. Get used to it, see what it's like, see how tedious it can be, and get through that. Learn to make the best of it and not just wait for I'll be happy when. Look at the differences between the entry-level jobs and the high-level jobs to understand what it is you're in for when you start working. Remember that when you do graduate from college or high school or graduate school, you'll start all over again. And you need to have that mindset and also be prepared for the long haul. The next thing is resilience. I call it getting your hard hat on, right? We all have to learn how to make mistakes. That's probably the hardest lesson of them all. Now we can go back to Jim's story of the grade inflation. The thing is, we all, as parents, as teachers, we have good intentions. We want to boost children's self-esteem. There's been a big movement to do that. And we want to shield them from hurt and disappointment. But when we do that, we are actually doing them a disservice. Managers are complaining that younger employees aren't able to take critical feedback. I've got so many stories of millennials coming into work and just literally crying if they've been told they've done something wrong or not good. It may be a good thing for millennials to be more conservative because they don't want to make all these mistakes, because they're afraid to make mistakes. But at the same time, we need to learn how to make mistakes to be able to move forward, to innovate, and to improvise and make progress. Now think about Thomas Edison. There's a famous quote by Thomas Edison. "I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 ways that won't work." And that's what he was talking about when he invented the light bulb. How can we get more resilient? Well, some of the obvious things are take risks now. Make mistakes and learn how to recover. The big lesson here, though, is for parents to let the kids make mistakes. Be there to guide and support them, not to do it for them. All the best leaders have made lots of mistakes and learned from them. My favorite example is Steve Jobs. He was fired from Apple Computer. He learned a lot from that experience and came back with the iRevolution. Think about that. I'm ready for some questions and answers if people want to come on in and talk about that.
Thanks, Joanie. Definitely. We want to welcome your questions now. I know that as I'm listening to you, Joanie, one of the things that comes to my mind is wondering at what age we start to get a bit more like starting to let our kids fail. So do you have any sense about that, Joanie? Is there a particular age at which, you know, we magically need to turn on more independence and more risk and more opportunities to fail for our kids?
That's an interesting question. I would say no, there's no magic age. It starts right when the day they're born, really. And we do it at different levels at different ages. And we obviously want to protect our 2-year-olds more than we want to protect our 16-year-olds, right? We can't let the 2-year-old run out into the street because they might get hit by a car, right? So we have to hold their hand when they cross the street. If you're holding your 16-year-old hand when you're crossing the street, people might laugh at you, and your 16-year-old in particular. So we come up with different age-appropriate things to do, and we can use our common sense there, but also think about what people are able to do and see if they can. Let them make the mistake, not let them make a drastic mistake that will be life critical, but smaller ones. You know, letting a kid dress themselves when they're young. Okay, so maybe they'll look funny or they'll get the shirt on backwards. What's wrong with that, really? Maybe you can help them fix it. Maybe they can go to school that way. It doesn't really matter that much. You know, when they're teens, letting them make mistakes. It might be, you know, letting them actually not do their studying for a test and get a D on the test, right? They'll learn from that and then do better next time, hopefully. Hopefully you can help them learn from that, but not doing it for them, not creating a situation where you are then contacting the teacher and saying, oh no, this kid needs another chance and that kind of thing.
That makes sense. So I have a couple of questions that have come in from the audience. Elena would like to know, between resilient, independent, authentic, and limber, which do you think is most important in today's work market? Oh, wow. Tons of questions coming in.
Oh, wow. That's a good one. What's the most important? I would say resilience is probably the most important. That's been getting a lot of talk in a lot of different areas as well. And if you're not resilient, you're not going to get through any of these other issues. So you need to have that to be able to get through. If you're not independent, then how can you make mistakes? If you're not flexible, how can you still keep going forward and moving forward in a positive way? So building that, and that's the toughest one to build. There's a lot of people who want to try to get this magic way of building resilience, and it's interesting because I did a study, for example, on something quite different, but it was a study of the devil's advocate, and this was back in grad school. We were looking at dissent in conversations, and the question is, can you say that you're disagreeing with somebody to get them to think about alternatives by saying you're the devil's advocate? And that's like, oh, well, just for, you know, to be devil's advocate, let me put this idea out there. And we found that it didn't work. It was actually not effective in getting people to really, truly think about other ideas because you didn't believe what they were saying. You thought, well, they really don't believe this. They're just saying it, so I don't really have to change my mind. Well, resilience is very similar. We want to give people artificial ways to build resilience, but you really need to build it, and you need to do it in authentic ways and go through the hardships and experience some of that pain to move forward and be able to take it in the end.
So I think I hear you saying, Joanie, that the only way to build resilience is to actually face challenges and hard times and fail.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yikes.
It's not a nice message to send, but that's what it is.
Sure. So all of us who are parents can rejoice when we see those opportunities for our kids.
Yeah, and it's hard. I can tell you as a parent myself, it is hard. Nobody wants to see their children suffer. That, you know, we've got the heartache, we've got when they skin their knee, you know, but sometimes they just have to get through it.
Got it. Well, I have a question from Kelly, and she said that her daughter, who's 9, falls apart when given feedback or a mistake is made. So she's wondering where to start, what she can say, and how she can jump this hover mothership and jump on the new path, because she's worried that it's going to seem like she's completely changing things. So what would you advise for someone who has previously been sheltering their child more? How can they make that transition to giving more opportunities for failure or pain or tough feedback?
Well, you know, I'm a proponent of honesty is the best policy. And some people feel more or less comfortable telling their kids their strategies and all of that. But to the extent that you feel comfortable telling your kid, you know, this is really important for you to be able to do these things independently, and give them some examples. Talk about what it is they need to develop to be able to be stronger, to be a big kid, to grow up and do things on their own. The next level, a 9-year-old might be thinking about middle school at some point, those kind of things. And talking about what it takes to do that. And so they know that when you go and you say, you know, I'm going to let you take this on your own, that you're doing it because you want them to gain those skills, and they have to realize that it's up to them to do it. Sometimes kids resonate with that. And hopefully that'll work. I guess the rest of that question was, what do you tell them, and how do you change and make it an abrupt change like that? Well, also perhaps gradually, starting small. That's what I always recommend to people. You know, it would be kind of startling to suddenly say, no, you're completely on your own. So start out with smaller things and let them build their confidence and get through some of the hardships, and then get bigger as you go along.
That's very helpful. So I have a comment from Kathy who says that they sent their kids to private school, or maybe they do, and they're forbidden from bringing forgotten items such as lunch and papers, which I think is an interesting concept. My daughter actually forgot a poster for her geometry class this morning, and I had to drive a half an hour out of my way, 15 minutes each way, to drop that off for her. So that's an interesting choice there, and I'm curious about what type of effect that would have.
Well, typically, it helps the kids learn pretty quickly that they can't depend on somebody else to do it for them. You think about it for yourself. If the consequences are grave, then you're going to remember it. And usually once you've experienced it, then you move forward. I can remember the time when I was young, and we had to take the school bus to school, and my dad said, look, if you miss the bus, I'm not driving you to school. And so we missed the bus one day. And he said, okay, we're going to go and catch up to the bus. I know a shortcut to the next stop. And so he drove us to the next stop, and we were so embarrassed to have to get on, like running after the bus from our car, getting on in front of all of our friends, and having to say, oh, yeah, well, we missed the bus. We never missed it again.
That is a great story. So Kathy says that her kids learn quickly to double check that they have everything.
Mm-hmm.
So we have one more comment from David. He says that principles and concepts are true of millennials already. Leading, training, and mentoring this group of employees requires a whole different dynamic than for those of other generations. And he said that commingling generations of workers provides a great opportunity for all. Thanks for that, David. Any comments from you, Joanie?
Sure, commingling. Yeah, that's, I do a lot of work in looking at how the generations differ in the workplace, and I talk about it as a form of diversity, and in terms of all the different diversities that there are out there. And it's interesting how we think about generations and we blame people for doing things and how they come across, but understanding the context in which they develop these approaches and these styles is really important. And I think it is a great way to learn, both for older people looking at younger people and for younger people looking at older people. So yeah, it is an opportunity for us all.
Thanks. So I know we have room for more questions at the end, so I encourage you and welcome you to continue to put those questions and comments in for the next segment of questions.
Okay, I'll continue on then.
Yes.
And I'm going to put down the video to focus on the slides. Okay, so the next piece is on independence. Well, you know, it's kind of funny we're talking about generational differences, because one of the things that I do notice is a clear difference between generations is the amount of feedback they want. You look at baby boomers and older, and they tend to want less feedback. They want the annual review. That's plenty. They're happy, and they'll continue doing their work week to week, month to month, without feedback. Millennials, on the other hand, want more feedback, and it even comes up as much as once a day. They'd love feedback, as much as they can get. And that's great if you can get it, but the problem is in the workplace is that managers aren't often able to deliver that kind of feedback. They don't have that kind of time. And that's the complaint I'm getting from managers, is that the millennials coming in are too demanding of their time, and then they don't have time to get their own work done. The managers, on the other hand, expect employees to be able to work independently and ask for help only when they really need it. I'm also going to do a quick little aside here, which I think is important for all of us to think about. My primary work is in leadership assessment and development. I help companies and individuals determine what kind of people are good for the positions, and if certain people have the skills and abilities to do the jobs in leadership positions, and then I help them develop those skills if they have gaps. And I can tell you firsthand from doing this that many leaders and managers are not that good at giving feedback. So I would not recommend depending on them to do that for you. This is a lesson for the millennials especially. Well, let's look at how millennials have grown up. Now, this is a time when millennials have grown up in an environment where parents are afraid to let their kids out of their sight for a variety of reasons. We've got the media showing all sorts of scary things. We've got liability. Schools don't want to be held liable. Nobody wants to be held liable if something happens. So we're growing up, the kids are growing up in an environment where people are not letting them have much freedom. It's interesting because when I talk to people of my generation, which is Gen X, and people who are older, we all tend to reminisce about our childhoods. We say, oh yeah, remember when we used to just go out and play after school, and then we'd have to be home for dinner? Our parents had no idea where we were. And then we all come back to, oh, well, I'd never let my kid do that. Right? It's changed. It's very different right now. And we can go into why, but I'm not going to take you there right now. We also have a situation where at school and recreation as well, the kids are structured and protected. We've been taught to make everything an educational opportunity for the kids. I mean, have you even seen these toothbrushes that time 3 minutes and play certain music or something so that the kids know how long they have to brush their teeth? You can't even just go and do your bedtime routine without having it be an educational opportunity. So millennials have grown up with a lack of freedom. They've also grown up without practice in decision making. Parents tend to be making choices for them. This is where millennials have been getting tripped up at work, many of them at least. They keep going back to their managers to make decisions for them. They might also rely on their parents to keep making decisions for them well into their careers. We've seen this, you know, some people might laugh. Some managers might say, no, that's impossible. But I can tell you, that many managers and human resource professionals are getting phone calls from parents of their employees. And you can't imagine that it's a very good opportunity because they are not very happy about having to deal with the parents. So what are some actions we can take to be more independent? Well, the problem with independence and the problem with doing things is that it's scary. And I've heard recently a nice little suggestion to do something scary or something that you're afraid of every day. Now, I don't know if I'd go that far, but it's good practice to just get used to feeling the fear and doing it, even if you're afraid to do it. Earning your trust. Now, that's another one which is dealing with children earning trust from their parents, because parents will say, well, my kid can't do that. They don't know how, or they aren't responsible enough, and that we just can't let them do that. Well, we see this with adults too. How do you earn trust from somebody? Again, I say start small. Start with something that's small and inconsequential. Let somebody do that, show that they can do it and be reliable, and then move on from there and give bigger levels of responsibility and keep going. There's a way to also, if they don't follow through and aren't responsible, to go backwards or perhaps have consequences for not being trustworthy or responsible. Learning how to make decisions and own up to the consequences is another big one. The issue is, if we make a decision and make a mistake and somebody else comes in and swoops us up and helps us get out of it, we're not learning what the consequences are of that. So the real message here to parents is to let go and let the kids make some of these mistakes and let them go out and be independent. And it's scary for us as parents to let the kids go. It's really scary to let them out of our sight and hope that everything will be okay and have faith that they'll come home safely. But at some point, they're going to do it anyway. We might as well get used to the idea, slowly, within reason. Another area that comes up is creativity. In the workplace, we have to be creative in many different ways. We have to be able to flex and deal with change. Change is huge right now. We have to be able to deal with a global economy. We have to deal with changing technology and different cultural advances and approaches. And we have to be able to be flexible. We also want to innovate. Now, we have this in the workplace constantly as well. We want innovative ideas. We want people to come up with new solutions, new products, new ways of doing things. So we have the innovation as well. The problem with creativity, though, is that it's a problem for all of us. Now I'm going to go into millennials for a second and then step back to something that's a good lesson for everyone. Millennials are growing up with a very structured lifestyle, very busy lifestyle, and a distracted lifestyle. What are we distracted with? Well, typically electronics. We see kids on their phones, texting, playing games from very young ages all the way up till adulthood. And I'm not going to even talk about parents or kids. We see adults doing it too. We're all doing it as adults. I even had one person tell me that he does his Facebooking when he's in the restroom. That's his time to do it. And I thought, wow, that's pretty crazy. If you can't even take a break to use the restroom without being connected, that's a little bit different. And I'm also concerned about the kind of Facebook posts I'm going to be getting from that person. Regardless, we are all plugged in, we're all structured, and we find that it's impacting creativity a great deal. I've done some recent posts on creativity, and There's a lot of research out there about this idea that creativity takes time. Let me put this in here. It doesn't happen on a schedule. Creativity does not happen on a schedule. It is something that creative people find that it comes up when they're having lunch, during a daydream, in the middle of the night. It's not necessarily during the 9 to 5 when they're at work. So we can't rely on that. We can't say, okay, now at 2 o'clock we're going to go to our class and be creative. Or now we have a deadline and we're going to be creative. There's that incubation period that they talk about, that creative ideas need to percolate up and get there to the surface. The unplugged problem is going back also to the Marshall Goldsmith problem, the great Western disease. We're all too busy and too distracted to give ourselves time to be creative. So adding in some downtime to your busy life. That sounds like kind of an oxymoron there, add more time to your busy life. But what it means is taking away some of the busyness of your life, taking time to unplug and reflect. In addition to that, there's also research that shows that millennials in particular are less creative in the workplace. And it's not necessarily in all areas of the workplace. Some specific research is from the engineering types of fields, and they're finding that the younger people coming in aren't as creative. And there's a lack of innovation in those fields. And it's looking at these issues, we're seeing some of the reasons why. And the surprise is that we look at the resumes that these young folks have built up. And this is the whole point. They've been spending their lives busy and structured, putting together these incredible resumes. And they show up at work, and the managers say, wow, I'm expecting amazing stuff from them. And then they come in and wait to be told what to do. And the manager's saying, well, wait a minute, I thought you were going to come up with some creative ideas. And the millennials will say, well, no, I thought you were going to tell me what to do, because that's what they've been, that's what their lives have been like. They are told what to do. It's been a structured interaction. Teresa Amabile is a researcher in creativity, and there are others as well who've been doing some research, and they find that actually time pressures stifle creativity. That's contrary to popular belief. Some of us say, well, you know, if I just give myself a deadline, I'll get the adrenaline flowing, and I'll be more creative. Well, no, you might get something done, but it doesn't necessarily give you the creative ideas. Unplugging, on the other hand, has been shown to increase creativity. There are actual studies out there that talk about turning off Facebook, that talk about turning off some of these other things for a period of time to give yourself some downtime to think, reflect, and going outside and taking a walk, being with nature. Those have all been shown to increase creativity. This is something that we are not prioritizing for young people at this time, and for older people too, and it's something we need to think about. All right, I've got some time for questions.
Thanks, Joanie. So we're welcoming more questions now, and there's my webcam. Yes, there. And I wrote down a couple. One of the ones that I wrote down was just wanting to give a shout out to a millennial who works with me. Sarah Reynes is someone on our team. She's out of college just a year or so, and she actually wrote a blog post at weavinginfluence.com today about how to succeed in your first job. So one of the things that I've been amazed with her is just how she's so responsible and independent and self-directed, not at all what you might expect given the current stereotypes. And when you made that comment, Joanie, about how parents are contacting bosses, what I thought about is how many of us on my team who are my age or, you know, in my generation, we actually want to find her parents and thank them. Whatever it is that they did, we want to like reach out and find out what they did so that we can replicate it with our own children. So I just thought I would share that question or that comment, an observation and shout out about Sarah. And, you know, we've had others as well. Here's a comment that came in about innovation. So Elena is wondering, don't you find that talking to kids about innovation puts on tremendous pressure? Would it be better to maybe talk about improvisation? And she asks for she's asking this for a reason, because back in the heyday it was all about not adhering to the status quo. So in short, many trendy words don't really help kids or adults know how to actually stand out and move on. So she's just wondering what your take on that might be.
Yeah, so I think I understand the question to be, are we telling the kids to do things that are real buzzwords in business right now? And yeah, absolutely, I would translate that into words that would be understandable at younger ages. And I'm not telling young kids to be innovative and to come up with new patents, you know, in their 8th grade or something like that. The idea is to tell parents especially and teachers to give the kids some downtime so that they can just play. Remember when Legos used to be just little building blocks and we would go and build things? Now they come with instructions and directions and exactly what you're supposed to make. You know, and we have little creativity kits in the toy store. I look at them all the time because they look like so much fun. Wow, here's your kit on how to do some creative activity. Rather than just giving some kids some paintbrushes and paper and saying, hey, go make something or find something to do. That was always the comment that came up when I was young. I'm bored, Mom. I'm bored, Dad. Well, go find something to do. It's like, well, oh, okay. And then we'd have to go find something to do. Now the parents and teachers feel like, oh, no, I better come up with something. I better have activities for them to do. We have things that people can do in cars on the long car rides rather than just coming up with making up a game. It was interesting at my daughter's school. They were looking at what the kids were doing during recess in the middle school, right? And this time, sometimes the kids are a little too cool to play, right? But they found that they make up games, and they were making up a game where they would be tossing a bottle up in the air and then, you know, making the rules different ways for different people to do different things like that. I don't even know what the game was, but it's just they had nothing to do. They didn't really have any things to do. They made up this game. It's probably how Kick the Can was invented originally. You know, I also want to make a comment, Becky, on Sarah. First of all, she's amazing. She's been doing work for me too, so yay, Sarah, and the rest of the folks. I'll give shout-outs to all your team, frankly. But when I give trends, I don't want to sit here and say every single person of a certain age is this way, because that would be a mistake. That's a stereotype. That's a mistake because everyone's individual. We're talking about certain trends that are occurring and certain concerns that are happening in the workplace, and obviously we're going to find a ton of exceptions to that of every age.
That's very helpful. So another question that's come in, Joanie, is related to this comment that you made about feedback and how, you know, oftentimes millennials will be looking for feedback, you know, every day or, you know, feedback frequently, and managers are having a rough time with that because they don't have time to provide feedback at that level. So the question is, you know, what recommendations would you have for a manager who's leading millennials to be able to know how to balance that, or, you know, how much feedback should we be providing as leaders?
Right. So here again, we can't say that millennials have to completely change to get into the workplace to adhere to the way baby boomers have set it up, because that's generally who are the top leaders at this time. And we can't say that the people in the workplace have to completely change to accommodate the new generation of people moving in. So there has to be some movement from both sides. Right? So what can managers do? Well, first of all, managers can take it as an opportunity to help educate people coming in on what they need and what their expectations are of the employees. So when I talk to people, I tell them right off what I want them to be able to do, how much time it should take, when I want them to check back in. And then I check in with them to see what they want too. You know, and if we have a big mismatch, we're going to have to talk about how to meet somewhere in the middle there, or get the person to the point where they can do these things more independently. What I often tell managers is to be more of a coach and less of a do-it-for-them, just like the parents, right? It's sometimes, this is what managers say to me too, oh, sometimes it's just quicker for me to just do it myself than to have to give so much feedback or to have to keep going and checking things and talking to someone else. Of course. Especially it's quicker because you've probably done it so many more times before. They're new. They're not going to get it done as quickly. So what I say is teach them how, coach them how, and let them either follow you around and see how to do it or ask them questions. That would be the mentoring, and let them see, but asking them questions as a coach. What do you think you should do? How would you solve that problem? What information do you need to be able to move forward on this? What have you tried already? What has worked? What hasn't worked? What barriers do you think you might encounter? Who do you think you might need to get involved to support you on this? Those kind of questions, and let them think, and then you can talk it through. Well, have you considered this? You know, well, what about this other thing that would happen? So that they have to start doing the thinking. They know what questions to ask themselves to be more independent and get things done, rather than coming back to ask, did I do this right? Did I do that right? Oh, can you tell me if this is okay, or what's the next step now? So helping them learn how to do it on their own is the way to go.
Super. Well, I just had a comment. David is adding to that. He says that coaching and feedback of employees works best when it's interactive versus reactive, which is what you're sharing, and that by collaborating and inviting others' perspectives, we achieve common goals more effectively. That's really helpful, David. And we had a bunch of questions come in while you were answering that one. Jason is wondering how much you think state laws like No Child Left Behind has on developing young people, and he's wondering what changes at the state level might need to be made.
Well, that's a big question. Yeah, well, I don't really know how to answer that in a way that, because I don't really work for the state and know the answer to that, but I can tell you that there have been some big things going on in the news lately about the No Child Left Behind Act and schools and other, child protective services and how they're affecting parenting at home and the level of independence. And the way that I approach this is to say, look, let's see what's going on in the workplace and figure out what it is we need to get people prepared to do. Now, there's some belief that we need to just purely teach academics to kids. I agree with that too. We don't want to just say we're only going to teach practical work skills at school. We want to teach people literature and math and other things as well. But at the same time, if we're not teaching them methods that are going to help them be successful when they get out to work, it's not going to be helpful. And the multiple choice exam is one of them. I don't know anyone, maybe there might be some exception to this, but I really don't know anyone at work who's had to take a multiple choice exam for their job. Maybe to get a licensing thing or something like that, but that's not the kind of work we do. So learning how to take those tests isn't necessarily improving our ability to be more productive in the workplace. How can we make changes to that is to get enough people in the business, I think especially, to tell them that this is not what people need and show them what some of the consequences of that are. And the lack of creativity is definitely one of them. The lack of communication skills is another. And I told you that story by Jim as well. The communication skills of kids aren't writing and they're taking these multiple choice tests and only taking multiple choice tests. It impedes their ability to learn how to develop these skills.
That's very helpful. Thanks, Joanie. So Paul is wondering if you'll answer a question about your book. And he's wondering why the book is both for parents and kids. And he's wondering if, let's see, why did she decide to just put one book for both parents and kids? Wouldn't it reinforce the dividing line between parents and kids if they had their own book? So wondering if you can just speak to the thinking behind how you wrote your book.
Yeah, oh sure, absolutely. No, that's a great idea. It would be great to have books 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, for the different audiences. But this seems to be a problem that we need to be having dialogue around, and that's why I wrote the book. I really want people to be talking about this with each other, and I think that it's important for parents and their kids to talk about it together. It's important for teachers and parents and people at work to be talking about it. And so the idea is to get everyone thinking about it from the different perspectives. Now, yeah, it might be good to have some specifics for the individuals, but I think it's also good, especially for the youth who are a little older, the teens and young 20-somethings who are getting out there in college, to be able to see why things are the way they are, look at the parents' perspective, and understand, sometimes we end up blaming each other for certain things. The people in the workplace are blaming young people for being, say, entitled or something like that, and the young people are blaming people, their parents, for not preparing them or something, and not realizing, well, there are some reasons why people have shifted their parenting methods and teaching methods, and getting people to see both sides, I think, helps get the dialogue going.
That's a really helpful perspective, Joanie. Thank you. We do have time for a few more questions, and while we're waiting for some to come in, I want to ask Joanie, is there a particular way you think that parents and kids could use your book to start that dialogue?
Yeah, well, start by reading it. Reading it, and the back of the book has a whole section in it. It's the part 3, which is the actions and reflection exercises, and a lot of those give opportunities for people to think about things and ask people for their thoughts, or go out and get feedback from others, or to have exercises on to go out and try things. And those are the areas would be really good to work with people together on that. There are even some little self-assessments back there, so you could do it and then say, well, what do you think is the way I answered this? Why don't you answer it and see if we come up with different views of myself or you, or that kind of thing. So those are kind of fun exercises to get people beginning in the dialogue.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thanks. So I'm also curious, Joanie, what would be your deepest hope for this book as people read it, or as they might share it with others? For those of you who don't know, this is the week that we're celebrating the launch of Joanie's book and hoping to get the book out in as big a way as possible. So what would be your deepest hope related to this book?
I wrote this book because I really felt that it needed to be written. And I didn't write it because I wanted to go out and make millions of dollars on publishing a book, which is a good thing because that's not the way it works. But I wrote it because it's something that needed to be said. It's something that we're grappling with in the workplace. It's also something that we're grappling with at home. And people are full of anxiety right now, and we're looking for answers on how to help young people be successful out there in the workplace. We've got the economy, that has fewer jobs than it did before. We've got people who don't have access to housing and all sorts of issues, people moving back home. And we've got concerns over safety and all of that. So how do we navigate? It's a complicated time for us. So my biggest hope is that we will get people thinking about it and talking about it. Because change needs to happen to get people more prepared for the workplace. And it's something that I actually was hoping to be able to talk about, so I'm glad you brought it up, Becky. But my next book is actually underway, and the book is really a social commentary piece. And it's more on the how we got here and why we're here, and what is it about our society that is going on to create this situation. And somebody asked me, actually it was Mark Levy who asked me, what is your biggest fear? What cripples you with fear? And I said, well, my biggest fear is that the leaders of tomorrow will not be able to lead our businesses, our society, and our politics in a way that they can be effective. My fear is that they'll still be, living at home with their parents, asking for help, and the parents will be old by then and not being able to deliver it. They'll be afraid to make decisions, take risks, and that's the worst case scenario. My fear is that that we're not preparing people to be independent and creative, flexible thinkers, and what is it about our society that we need to change to get people to be there. This book is more of a guide on some really applied things on how we can get there immediately. What is it that we can do right now, right today, to make some changes in our own lives? But the bigger picture, like was already asked about policies in the government, policies at schools, universities, home, in the workplace, what kind of changes need to be made to get people prepared. That's a much bigger issue.
Well, we'll all be waiting for that next book, Joanie, and excited to see it when it comes. I think you have a slide that shows people how they can get in touch with you. As we wrap up the hour, I want to make sure people know how to find you. So great. So you can find more about Joanie at her main website, flexibleworksolutions.com. You can find her on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. And also, if you're willing and able to share her book with others, you can find some great resources to do so at flyingwithout.com. So Joanie, thank you so much for this content-filled hour and the interaction and the answers. And I know that this is definitely a conversation that I want to carry when my 13-year-old gets home tonight and really be able to start to process some of this content together. So thank you so much, Joanie.
Thank you, Becky. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you again.